Now, for more analysis on this, I'm joined by political analyst Joseph Ochieno. Mr. Ochieno, thank you so much. We appreciate your time this afternoon. What are the key takeaways from the recent DRC election outcomes in terms of political and social implications?
There are many, but Happy New Year to you. And indeed, Happy New Year to our Congolese brethren. As you know, I'm speaking from Kampala, and that's my neighborhood. The biggest, of course, is if the results were to be confirmed, is the massive victory for incumbent President Tshisekedi, and that is nearly 2/3 majority. Usually, those are generally uncommon in political terms. And considering the circumstance in which Mr. Tshisekedi became president 5 years ago, in a disputed elections, in which until now the majority of the people believe he did not win those elections, but for him to go through and govern over a 5-year period, go through a second election, meaning some second term election for second term, and win with a vast majority is extraordinary. But number two, it's interesting that actually, ironically, the guy who's supposed to have won allegedly the last elections 5 years ago only gets officially on these figures just about 5%, meaning less than 10 percentage points. That, to me, is extraordinary. But beyond that, again, as I say, the manner in which the common cries on the continent, except you guys, mainly in South Africa, plus a few of your neighbors. These are cries on the African continent. Every time elections do take place, cries of rigging, and again, cries of rigging. But amidst that, every other time, you find this common thing on this continent where elections are held, but seemingly governments and electoral commissions do not have the capacity and organization and possibly the will to organize elections that have a free reflection. A free will gives the people a seemingly fair process through the entirety of the whole thing. Up to 30%, it is argued, of the polling stations in these elections were not able to open on time. Considering the history of this country, considering the size of this country, considering the implications of these election results, you just simply say, why and how could it be that all the resources necessary are deployed in this process to make sure that we go through an electoral process that, whatever the outcome, at least generally has not only a reflection of the free will of the people, but at least a sense of confidence that observers like you and me can say, by and large, it seems to reflect the will of the majority of the people in Congo. So that, to me, is really the sickness of the continent, sickness, unfortunately, of Congo. But of course, I have to state, as a matter of disclaimer, the country is vast, the country is big, the infrastructure was almost dead, and the complexities in politics, including the fact that a number of other nations rule that country, we will not go into details for the moment, tells you that, well, maybe we can blame them as part of the Africa problem, but yes, it's understandable that, yes, Congo is still a huge amount of work to be done, meaning Congo is work in progress.
Most certainly. And with all of this said, Joseph, I mean, how do these results affect the stability and the governance of the DRC?
Extremely important question. And as I said, it will be very interesting to see what happens over the next several days. The opposition leaders have asked people to go into the streets, whether or not these are things which are able and possible to be done in Congo, in Kinshasa, and other major cities without undue loss of lives, and whether or not, if you like, the governing authorities and the opposition are able to do this democratically, manner in which, well, you can say that it has an impact in terms of changing and influencing opinion of the state in order to be able to review their positions neither here nor there. So very important. But in the event then that the Tshisekedi is confirmed as indeed the president and is sworn in as a president, it would be extremely important. It would be important for this country, the country that first received a president that Patrice Lumumba, the name that most Africans want to associate with, but a president that was not allowed, a prime minister, in fact, at the time, that was never allowed to govern and was brutally killed by, you guess what, apartheid friends in the global north. And since then, this country has generally has a huge amount of stability. For the first time, it would be, in fact, second time now, an incumbent winning elections and going for second term, meaning a process of beginning, which again is another difficult thing on the continent. In my own native Uganda, there is a ruler who is in charge by force of arms, since perhaps most people watching this program have ever been born. So it's not news. So it will be very interesting on the one hand that actually we see a transition from one elected leader to another. In this case, a transition of an election where you have a president who legitimately has the mandate of the people after an election, regardless of how other people would view. So that would be important as, if you like, a democratic addition for that country and a democratic addition for the continent. But where it's more important is Tshisekedi minus him is his father, who was a strong, well-known opposition leader in that country. Historic, actually. Maybe his son is reaping some of the benefits from him. It means, therefore, that there's a possibility that this country can possibly pull together across the political divide, that this country then can have a possibility that we can call DRC Congo as one nation state. Hopefully, an outcome of that will mean that the parts of the country that is unreachable, a democratic dividend, it becomes a reality, and that particularly Eastern Congo, where, in fact, there are millions of people who did not vote simply because of political instability, let alone the other millions who did not vote or could not vote because of infrastructure challenges, that the country is moved together as one. One, as you said in your introduction, this is the richest, I think one of your guests was saying earlier, this is the richest continent in terms of human and natural resources. But Congo is the richest as a nation state in terms of natural resources. So it's a shame that this country, so hugely rich, can also suffer with a huge amount of poverty and instability. So election outcome beyond January, where there is an incumbent sworn in, and where perhaps opposition rally around and they decide to go through democratic polity rather than violent polity, is very important for Congo, very important for its neighbors, and indeed will be very important for this continent. And I hope somewhere, somehow, that this becomes the more likely possibility.
It certainly is very important, Joseph. You made mention earlier on, of course, that the elections were marred with logistical problems. You do say that a lot of the infrastructure in the country is quite old. Some parts of the country had to move to a second day of voting. And we also saw, like you made mention, that Martin Fayulu, who's the former oil executive there, only received 5% of those votes, which is quite a huge margin between himself and Tshisekedi. Now, opposition parties have come on to say that they don't have faith in the courts to take on the issue of possible rigging of this electoral process, and they would rather refer to alternatives and taking to the streets. What's your take on that?
It's very interesting. One of the takes out of this is, as I said from the beginning, the magnitude of the victory, if true and if confirmed, is so huge, number one. And number two, as you said, Martin Fayulu, who was the favorite last time, goes to bag equivalent of less than 10%. What that normally does, and this is a part of our trade, me and you, around the world, that elections that are close tend to be generally, genuinely contested. The problem here is the margin of victory is so huge that it becomes extremely difficult for the opposition to lay claim to the justification that in the absence of some of these irregularities, there are possibilities that they could win. Meaning, for instance, in Martin Fayulu's case, you'd simply say that you would still multiply his results by 10, and you would still just about be having equivalent of a 10 percentage point in terms of victory in this election. So it makes it very, very difficult. I just think that that said, in the electoral process, and politics about perception, in the electoral process, you really don't want anything to cause the perception, the view that, there is a sense of injustice, a sense of unfairness. And that's part of the problem here. The extension to the second day, while it has been suggested by the opposition as unconstitutional and therefore perhaps contributing, and I don't have sufficient evidence in this. In fact, I've not had a lot of conversations with friends, some of whom may have been observers in this election. In fact, I don't know many observers this time around with whom I have sufficient information, I must say, closely on the ground. Generally, I think it is difficult to say that anything other than that incompetence means that perhaps even if President Tshisekedi was going to win by 40% after his pass past the post system, it would have been a justifiable win. The margin is too big, in my opinion, for the opposition to cry foul. However, they have absolute right. And of course, as a matter of law, in the event that the irregularities that take place and they're actually unlawful, they have a right to claim, and I don't know about Congo's constitutional provisions in this, electoral provisions in this, to say that, well, the elections are brought into disrepute and therefore the results are questioned. But of course, the lawyers would say normally, as I say, that in the event that this matter has come through, serious legal observers, what are the evidence that you provide, that whether or not the evidence provided on the basis of balance of probability that the election outcome would be other than this and therefore would be overturned.
Right.
Those are some of the considerations which to be made, but at the end of the day, I'm not quite sure whether these are the legalities
or not.
Yes, Joseph, in any case,
just so that I come in there, yeah. Joseph, we are running out of time, and I really want to know with this because we know that in his last election rally, Mr. Tshisekedi vowed to declare war on Rwanda. How do these election outcomes impact on the regional dynamics in Central Africa, especially with Uganda and Rwanda?
You would be interested in that question, wouldn't you? Absolutely, understandably. No, I think it may have been a card that he played and a card that may have worked for him. Quite rightly, emotively, Rwanda is not a good name in Congo, nor is my native Uganda. But I can tell you, and I can tell my Congolese friends, that no, I'm completely with them when it comes to the question of Uganda and Rwanda, particularly the political leaders meddling that country. Some of them are people whom we should actually possibly take to The Hague. So they're absolutely right. Whether or not Tshisekedi is able to implement whatever he had promised is unlikely because I think it was possible about posturing. But in any case, after the election victory like this, I think all he needs is confidence backed by the citizens of Congo. He needs to be able to show leadership and make sure that he's able to mobilize capacity, military capacity, security capacity, organizational capacity, structural capacity in Congo to make sure that he's able to govern for Congolese. The more he's able to do that, the more he's able to gain legitimacy and credibility, the more he'll be able to have capacity to challenge any influences by Rwanda, Uganda, or any other neighbors or countries or other interests in that country. But that said, Rwanda is only one of the problems. Uganda is the other. But many other problems in Congo are direct results of powerful forces outside this continent who are literally looting that country. I hope that when he's looking at Rwanda, he should also be able to look at some of the forces beyond the continent who have made it almost impossible for that country to be governed as one country since independence.
Most certainly. Joseph, thank you so much. We're looking for that swearing in on the 20th of January of what could happen in between. Time will tell. Thank you so much for your time.